Daniel Reed liked to see things with his own eyes. He was a quiet billionaire who did not enjoy grand entrances or long speeches. On a cool weekday morning, just after sunrise, he arrived at one of his hotels wearing a simple jacket and carrying only a small notebook. The city was waking up, buses sighed at stops, cafe doors opened, and street vendors set out warm bread. Daniel stood near the service entrance for a moment, watching staff arrive with sleepy smiles and fast steps. He took a slow breath and walked in, choosing the back hallway instead of the main lobby. He wanted to understand the real rhythm of the place, the rhythm behind the polished marble and bright lights seen by guests. In the basement level, the air smelled like laundry detergent and fresh coffee. A few housekeepers were gathering near the supply room, adjusting name tags and tying back hair with quick, practiced hands. Lila stood among them with a calm, ready look. She was a black housekeeper in her late 20s with gentle eyes and a steady way of moving. Her cart was neat, her pens lined up, her little checklist clipped in front. On her wrist, a silver bracelet caught the light. It had a tiny star charm with faint hand-etched lines, and it looked both old and carefully cared for. She touched it once, the way someone touches a small memory. "Good morning," Lila said to her team, her voice warm and soft. She asked about someone's child who had a cold and told a new hire that the extra towels were stored behind the second shelf, not the first. She noticed a senior colleague rubbing her shoulder and quietly offered to take one of the heavier rooms. "I've got it," she said, smiling. "It's okay. We're a team." The older colleague thanked her with relief. Lila's smile reached her eyes. Daniel stood partly in the doorway, unnoticed. He had learned a long time ago that the truth of a company lived in rooms where no one expected to be seen. He watched Lila for a minute, the way she listened when others spoke, the way she kept her cart organized, the way she gave a bottle of water to a security guard who looked tired. None of it was dramatic. It was human and generous. He wrote 2 words in his notebook: quiet leadership, and underlined them once. The housekeeping manager gave out room assignments, and the team moved with energy. Lila took her cart into the hallway and pushed off toward the elevator, humming a tune under her breath. Daniel decided to follow the route that staff took, not the guest elevator. He pressed the service elevator button and stepped in with a small group, a bellman carrying a stack of folded uniforms, a maintenance worker with a tool bag, and Lila with her neat cart. The elevator doors closed with a soft slide, and the hum of the cables filled the space. In the mirror on the elevator wall, Daniel saw Lila's face, focused but peaceful. She checked her checklist, then looked up and gave a polite nod to everyone. The bellman cracked a small joke about the coffee being too strong. Lila laughed lightly and said strong coffee meant a strong morning. The elevator stopped on the 7th floor. As the doors opened, Lila adjusted the strap of her glove bag, and her bracelet slipped slightly, turning on her wrist. The tiny star charm flashed. Daniel's heart gave a small, unexpected jump. The star was not just a star. It looked like the promise star charm he remembered from years ago, when his mother used to run a tiny outreach program. His mother would polish each bracelet with a soft cloth at the kitchen table, then hand them to women at a humble shelter they visited together. Each bracelet had a little mark, a line pattern like rays around a star, made by a local artisan who wanted to help. The bracelet was more than jewelry. It meant, you are seen. You are not alone. There is a promise to walk with you a little way. The elevator doors closed again, and the moment passed, but Daniel felt something open inside his memory. He could see his mother's hands, noticing every detail with care. He heard her say, a promise should be a path, not a picture. He had been younger then, busy and impatient, thinking big thoughts about business while she thought simple thoughts about people. After she passed away, the program was packed into boxes. He had told himself he would return to it. Life kept moving. Now, here he was, in a hotel he owned, watching a young woman wear a bracelet that looked like his mother's promise. On the 9th floor, Lila stepped out with her cart and greeted a guest in the hallway with a soft good morning. She bent to pick up a room service card that had fallen and placed it neatly back on the door. Daniel stayed inside the elevator and let the doors shut, riding up one more floor, quiet in his thoughts. He did not want to stop her or ask questions in a crowded space. He wanted to be respectful and sure. He pressed the button to go back down, planning to continue his walk through the kitchen and laundry, as he always did, but his mind kept returning to the small star and the warm kitchen light in his mother's old house. He stepped out onto the service level again and walked toward the laundry, where high machines rolled with steady sound. He greeted people by name when he could, and when he could not, he asked and then repeated the names twice to remember them. He praised a young man for the crisp folds of pillowcases, then asked a woman if the new carts rolled better than the old ones. He heard two cooks laugh in the distance when someone spilled flour. He wrote down a note about the timing of supply deliveries. He moved as he always moved, paying attention, writing ideas, solving small problems. But the bracelet followed him like a gentle echo. A little later, he saw Lila again, this time in a quiet side hallway. She waited for a guest to pass, then guided her cart into a corner to make space. Daniel noticed the tiny star again as she reached for a fresh set of sheets. The charm's edges were smooth with time, and the etched lines were faint but real. He felt his eyes warm. It surprised him how quickly emotion rose, not from show, not for anyone else to see, but from a deep place where love and memory live. He looked away and breathed slowly. He did not want to alarm her or make her feel watched. He had seen people in power make simple moments heavy. He would not do that. Lila knocked gently on a door, announced herself, and entered a room to clean. Inside, she moved with easy rhythm, collecting used towels, opening a window for fresh air, aligning notebooks on the desk, placing a new pen in the center. She paused for a second to smooth the bedspread with both hands, checking for wrinkles, not satisfied until every corner looked cared for. When she finished, she left a small thank you note on the pillow, "We hope your day is peaceful." Her handwriting was tidy and soft. She looked at the bracelet again as she wiped the last fingerprint from the mirror. It was a small touch, but it mattered to her to do the job with pride. Daniel stood outside by the service closet and spoke with the housekeeping manager about staff schedules. He asked whether the night shift had enough rest time before morning rotations. The manager admitted it was tight some days and said they were trying to balance rooms with breaks. Daniel nodded and wrote another note. "We can adjust," he said. "People do their best when they're seen." The manager smiled, a little surprised to hear this from a man who could have chosen to talk only about numbers. Daniel had learned, often from his mother, that numbers were important, but people were the story behind them. Near the end of the morning rush, rain began to whisper against the windows. The sky turned soft gray, and the city lights brightened in the daylight. Lila wheeled her cart toward the service elevator again, her shoes tapping lightly on the floor. She paused to let a room service server pass with a tray of tea. "Smells good," she said with a laugh. The server grinned and whispered that the chef was testing a new blend. Lila's smile stayed with her as she pressed the elevator button. She wrapped the bracelet gently with her fingers, as if checking that it was secure. The star charm rested on her wrist like a quiet friend. Daniel decided to take the stairs down a flight to clear his head. As he walked, he thought about the boxes in storage, the letters, the small ledgers, the folding table his mother used for the program that gave out those bracelets. He remembered the faces of a few women who had come for a hot meal and left with more than a meal. He remembered his mother saying, "When someone is ready to climb, you hold the ladder steady." Daniel had built ladders in business, he knew how to build systems, teams, and tools. But this was a different kind of ladder. It needed patience, follow-up, names remembered, calls returned. He reached the lower hallway and stopped by a window to watch the rain draw lines on the glass. He was not a man who cried easily in public. In boardrooms, he kept his voice level, in reports, he kept his numbers exact. But now, alone with the rain and the hum of the building, his eyes filled. Not with sadness alone, and not with joy alone, but with the meeting of both. The small star, the same lines he had seen on his mother's bracelets, was here, in this place, on the wrist of a person who moved through the world with care. It felt like a message gentle, not forcing anything, asking him to remember, to look again, to ask himself what promise remained unfinished. Footsteps echoed, and he wiped his eyes quickly with the side of his hand. A bellman passed with a polite nod, and Daniel nodded back. He put his notebook away and stood straight again. There would be time to confirm, to ask respectfully, to learn the bracelet's path from one hand to another. He would not hurry the moment or turn it into a scene. For now, he would continue his walk, the kitchen, the pantry, the staff lounge. He would keep listening. He would keep noticing. Lila, unaware of the storm of memory she had stirred, returned to her list. She flipped a page and moved toward a room where a family had stayed. She found a lost crayon beneath a chair and placed it on the desk with a smile, imagining a small hand reaching for it later, happy to be reunited. She aligned the remote, watered a plant that looked thirsty, and opened the curtains just enough to invite daylight. When she left, the room felt not only clean but also kind. By noon, the hotel hummed with its usual comfort. Guests checked out with rolling suitcases, and new guests arrived with hopeful faces. The lobby sparkled, the back hallways stayed steady. Lila's bracelet glinted now and then as she worked, the star a quiet reminder she carried without thinking. Daniel crossed the lobby in a plain jacket, a small figure in a large space, and paused near the revolving door. He turned back for one more walk through the service corridor, his steps measured, his thoughts clear and full. Somewhere between the laundry room and the 7th-floor hallway, a thread had connected his present to his past. He could feel it light, real, and calling him to pay attention. Outside, the rain softened, and the city brightened again. Inside, Lila pushed her cart, checked her list, and moved on to the next room. Daniel stood for a moment at the mouth of the hallway, listening to the quiet work of many hands. He did not make a speech. He did not announce his name. He simply watched, then turned away with a gentle breath. The day had started like any other. It no longer felt ordinary. Rain began as a soft whisper on the tall windows and grew into a steady song that filled the hotel with a calm sound. The gray sky pressed low, and guests came down with umbrellas hanging from their hands, shaking off drops on the floor mats. The doorman stood a little closer to the entrance. The bell team moved with quick steps, careful not to slip. The lobby smelled like warm coffee and clean air. Lila pushed her cart down a side hall with a light smile and a focused look, ready for the small changes a rainy day brings. At the service entrance, a delivery driver came in with wet sleeves and careful steps. He looked cold, the kind of cold that settles into your fingers. Lila happened to pass at that moment. She paused, turned her cart to the side so others could pass, and said, "1 second." She stepped into the staff lounge and came back with a paper cup. "It's the new tea the chef is testing. Ginger and lemon," she said with a friendly whisper. The driver held the cup with both hands and breathed in the steam. His shoulders lowered with relief. "Thank you," he said, surprised. "That helps." Lila gave a small nod and a smile that reached her eyes, then continued down the hall toward her next room. Daniel watched from near the doorway of the staff lounge. He had come to this part of the building to ask how the team handled incoming deliveries during storms, but the question faded for a moment. He saw the way Lila had noticed the driver's need before he asked. He saw her move quickly, quietly, and with care. It felt like a scene his mother would have loved, simple kindness, no camera, no announcement. A thought rose in him again, the bracelet on Lila's wrist, the tiny star with faint lines, the image from his memory. He pressed his lips together, steadying himself, and followed the route toward the linen closet. In the side corridor, the lights were soft. Someone had placed a small plant on the windowsill, and drops tapped against the glass. Lila adjusted a stack of towels on her cart and checked her list. When she reached to tuck a stray curl of hair behind her ear, the bracelet turned, and the star flashed once. It was not a bright flash. It was gentle, like the wink of a small light. Daniel felt the old memory rush back fully, like a door opening without noise. He saw his mother at the kitchen table, polishing small charms and setting aside a few to take to a shelter. He heard her say, "A promise should feel like a hand you can hold." He swallowed, then spoke in a soft, respectful voice. "Excuse me," Daniel said. "May I ask you a personal question about your bracelet?" Lila looked up, surprised, but her face stayed calm. She had seen this man before that morning, quiet and observing. He did not carry himself like a difficult guest, and he did not speak like someone trying to show power. His voice held care. "Sure," she said gently. "What would you like to know?" "It's the star," he said, pointing only with his eyes, not his finger. "It looks familiar to me. The little lines. Do you know where it came from?" Lila touched the charm and turned it between her fingers, like a person holding a small story. "It was my mother's," she said. "She received it years ago from a program at a church. She told me the star meant hope. She wore it when she went to interviews or when she felt scared. She used to say, 'Keep this. Keep going.' When she got sick, she gave it to me. I've worn it ever since." Daniel felt his eyes warm. He blinked once and kept his tone steady. "Do you remember what the program was called?" he asked. "I know that is a lot to ask. Please forgive me if it's too much." Lila shook her head slowly. "I don't remember the exact name," she admitted. "It was small. They gave warm meals sometimes, helped with forms, and offered study help for women. My mother had a little paper with a phone number. The place was kind. She would come home and say, 'They see me there.' That mattered to her." "Thank you for telling me," Daniel said softly. He meant it. He did not want to press. He did not want to cause any discomfort. He glanced at the bracelet again, not to stare, but to be sure. The tiny etched lines around the star, the artisan had made them by hand, one by one. His mother used to hold the charms up to the light to check each mark. He knew that pattern. It was like seeing a signature without letters. He felt emotion climb like a wave, and he steadied himself against it. Lila shifted, a little curious now. "It looks familiar to you?" she asked, not to pry, but because she sensed something important under his calm voice. "It does," Daniel said. "My mother used to run a small outreach project. She worked with a few volunteers and a local artist to make these star bracelets. They wanted to give something that felt like dignity and a path. I'm not sure yet, but I think your bracelet may have come from her project. I could be wrong. Even if I am, I want to say," he paused and found simple words. "It looks like love to me." Lila's eyes softened. She looked down at the star and then back up. "That sounds like the place my mother described," she said. She would hold the bracelet and breathe. It helped her feel brave. She used to say, "Someone believed in me enough to help, so I must keep going." A housekeeping cart squeaked past at the end of the hall, and a colleague waved at Lila. Lila waved back and stepped a little closer to the wall to give space. The corridor felt quiet again. Daniel did not want to turn this moment into a big story in front of others. He spoke with warmth but also with care. "I'm sorry for asking you so suddenly," he said. "Thank you for trusting me with your memory." "It's okay," Lila said, tipping her head in understanding. "It's a good memory. My mother liked to fix her hair in the mirror and then touch the bracelet twice, like a small prayer. She told me, if you feel small, hold the star. Remember, you are not small to me. When I wear it, I feel close to her. What was your mother's name? Daniel asked, and the question came out gentle, like a hand resting on a table. Adrienne, Lila said. Adrienne Brooks. She said the name with respect, as if placing it carefully in the room. Daniel repeated the name in a near whisper, as if to set it in his memory. Adrienne, he said. Thank you. He took a small breath. He did not ask more questions. He did not ask for personal history or dates or anything that would push beyond what was kind. Instead, he let the moment breathe. You have honored her, he said. It shows in the way you work. Lila's smile was quiet and real. Thank you, she said. I try. Work is not only about cleaning. It's also about how a room feels when someone enters. My mother used to say, if your hands bring care, people can feel it. I think about that when I make a bed or place a note. A bell chime sounded from the service elevator. The rain outside tapped a steady rhythm on the windows. In the distance, someone laughed in the kitchen. The hotel carried on around them, the way a city carries on while two people share a small, important talk. Daniel glanced toward the elevator and then back to Lila. I won't keep you, he said. Thank you again for sharing. And thank you for the tea you gave that driver. I saw that. It mattered. Lila looked a little shy at that. He looked cold, she said simply. Tea is not big, but it's something. It is, Daniel said. Sometimes small things hold a day together. They shared a brief, peaceful silence. Then Lila adjusted her gloves, checked her list, and gave a respectful nod. I'll get back to the rooms, she said. I hope your day stays dry, even if the sky doesn't. She smiled at her own little joke. Daniel smiled too, a small, grateful curve of the mouth. You as well, he said. He stepped aside to let her pass, and she guided her cart down the hall, the bracelet resting neatly on her wrist. When she turned the corner, Daniel stood still for a second. He placed a hand on the cool wall and closed his eyes. The wave of feeling he had kept steady rose again: love for his mother, gratitude for this unexpected thread, and a quiet ache for promises that might not have been fully kept after she left the world. He opened his eyes and looked down the empty hall. He did not want anyone to see him cry, not because tears are wrong, but because this felt private, like a prayer whispered in a quiet room. He took a slow step and then another, walking toward a small window where he could look outside. Rain drew silver lines across the glass. Cars moved like careful fish on the wet street. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it to the corners of his eyes, then breathed out. He felt both heavy and light at the same time: heavy with memory, light with the feeling that something was being set right, or could be set right, if he chose. In the staff lounge, a kettle clicked off, and someone poured tea. The faint smell of ginger drifted through the door. Daniel thought of a box of old ledgers and letters stored far away, sealed after his mother's passing. He had told himself for years that he would open those boxes on a quiet weekend and make time to read every page. He had told himself he would find a way to honor what she started. Work had been loud, the boxes had been quiet. Today, the quiet had spoken. He folded the handkerchief and tucked it away. He stood a little taller, not in a proud way, but in a present way. He turned back toward the hallway where Lila had gone, hearing the soft rumble of the service elevator and the rolling of carts. He did not follow her now. He did not need to. He had heard what he needed to hear for this moment: a mother's name, a star's meaning, a daughter's steady heart. The rest could come step by step, with care. Lila, now on the next floor, knocked gently and announced herself at another door. She worked with the same rhythm as always: collect, clean, consider, and care. She opened a window just a little to let in the smell of rain. She aligned a small stack of travel guides and placed a fresh pen where it was easy to reach. Before she left, she looked at the star. "We keep going," she whispered, not as a big statement, but as a habit of hope. Downstairs, Daniel spoke with a supervisor about afternoon schedules, rain plans, and extra mats near the doors. He kept his voice even and his questions clear. He added a note to find out who supplied the staff umbrellas and whether they needed more. He seemed his usual calm self. Only the softness around his eyes told the truth of the morning. When the conversation ended, he walked again toward the service stairs, not to hide, but to take the path that felt real. The day moved on. The rain slowed, then returned, as if the sky could not decide. Guests checked in and shook off umbrellas. Children looked out windows and traced little paths in foggy glass. Staff kept moving, wheels turning, doors opening, rooms becoming fresh again. The hotel worked like a kind machine run by human hands. In the middle of it, one small star rested on one wrist, and one quiet man carried a new promise in his heart. By late afternoon, the rain finally thinned to a mist. Light slipped through the clouds, gentle and pale. Daniel paused at the edge of the lobby and looked toward the hallway where Lila had disappeared earlier. He did not see her now, but he did not need to. The moment had already done its work. He stepped outside under the awning and watched the street shine. The world looked the same as it had that morning, and still, it felt different. Sometimes, he thought, a life does not change with a loud sound. Sometimes it turns with a soft click, like a charm turning on a bracelet, catching just enough light to show the path ahead. The next morning came with soft light through gray clouds. The rain had stopped, but the air carried the smell of damp streets. Inside the hotel, the staff moved with calm rhythm, preparing for the day's work. Guests rolled their suitcases across the polished floor, while in the service hallways, carts squeaked and doors clicked quietly. Daniel arrived early again, choosing the same plain jacket and simple shoes. He did not want to be noticed as the owner. He wanted to see things with his own eyes, to feel the pulse of the place where the bracelet had appeared like a voice from the past. His mind carried the weight of the small star and the gentle words he had heard from Lila the day before. He knew this was no accident. A thread had been pulled, and he needed to follow it. He asked his assistant, discreetly, to bring files from storage boxes that had not been opened for years. They contained the records of his late mother's program, Promise Star. When his mother was alive, she had dedicated part of her time to helping struggling families. After her passing, the program was set aside, like a lamp covered in dust. Daniel had been busy with boardrooms, deals, and buildings, but now he could no longer ignore it. The bracelet had reminded him that promises do not expire simply because time has passed. Later that day, Daniel arranged a quiet meeting. He did not want to make it heavy or intimidating, so he asked HR to help create a safe space. He invited Lila with care, making sure she understood she was not in trouble, not under inspection. He simply wished to learn more about the bracelet and her story. Lila arrived with calm grace, wearing her clean uniform, her hair tied back, the bracelet shining faintly at her wrist. She looked a little nervous at first but soon relaxed when she saw Daniel's gentle manner. He sat not at the head of the table, but to the side, notebook closed, pen resting. "Thank you for giving me your time," he began. "I want to listen. Please share only what feels comfortable." Lila nodded. Her voice was soft but steady. She began with her mother, Adrienne. She told how Adrienne worked long hours at two jobs, cleaning in the mornings, cashiering in the evenings. Life was not easy. But one day, a small program at a church gave her a bracelet and offered study help. "My mother always said that was the first time she felt someone looked at her with real respect," Lila explained. "It was not just charity. They gave her hope. She kept the bracelet as her most precious thing. She wore it until she grew sick, and then she gave it to me. Daniel listened with full attention. He leaned forward slightly, his hands folded, his eyes steady. He could almost see his mother's handwriting on the sign-up forms. He asked softly, "Did your mother ever try to use the program for more support?" "Yes," Lila said. She filled out a paper. There was a phone number. But soon after, the program seemed to stop. No one called back. She was disappointed, but she still told me, "We are not forgotten. This bracelet is proof." Her words struck Daniel deeply. He remembered how his mother's passing had left the program unfinished. Boxes of papers, names of women, promises that had not been fully honored. He felt a pang, not guilt in a loud sense, but a quiet responsibility. These were lives touched by a promise, and some had been left waiting. "I want to ask," Daniel said carefully, "do you still have that paper?" Lila nodded. "Yes, it's old and faded, but I kept it in an envelope. My mother believed it mattered. She promised to bring it the next day." The conversation moved gently. Lila shared her own journey, how she had dreamed of nursing school but paused her studies to care for her younger brother. She now worked nights to save money and also helped neighbors with forms, remembering how her mother once struggled with paperwork. "I wear the bracelet to remind me not to give up," she said. "It feels like a hand holding mine." Daniel felt his throat tighten. He realized the bracelet was not just a memory. It was a path still asking to be walked. "You've done more than not give up," he said. "You've carried hope forward, just as my mother would have wished." That evening, after the meeting, Daniel went to his office where the boxes from storage had arrived. Dust coated the lids, and the cardboard was softened by years. He lifted the first box and opened it. Inside lay old ledgers, handwritten notes, and small receipts. He recognized his mother's neat cursive. He saw lists of names, addresses, dates, and small notes like "call back" or "child needs uniform." Each line was a story. Each line was a life. He flipped through until he found what he had hoped for, a list marked "bracelets delivered." Each name had a number. Next to Adrienne Brooks was a note, "follow-up needed. Mentorship pending." And then nothing. A blank space where action should have followed. Daniel pressed his palm to the page, closing his eyes. He remembered his mother sitting late at night with tired eyes, saying, "One more call, Danny. One more letter." He had brushed it off then, telling her she needed rest. He now understood that her rest had been stolen by her sense of duty. She had carried promises in her heart, even when her body was weary. The discovery filled him with both sorrow and resolve. He realized that if Lila's mother was one of the names, then dozens more must have similar stories, people waiting, people who had held hope even when the program stopped. He knew he could not change the past, but he could change the present. The next day, when Lila brought the faded paper, Daniel held it with reverence. The phone number was smudged, the ink thin, but it matched the records in the box. "Yes," he whispered. "This was my mother's program. This was her promise." Lila looked at him with wide eyes. "So it was real?" she asked. "It was real," Daniel said firmly. "And it still is. I will make sure of it." In that moment, he made a silent vow: he would not let the bracelet remain just a symbol of what could have been. He would reopen the path, rebuild the promise, and honor every name in those ledgers. For the first time in years, Daniel felt his wealth was not just about buildings, deals, or numbers. It was about hands, hearts, and hope. And it all began with a small silver bracelet worn by a maid who worked quietly, kindly, and with the strength of her mother's memory shining at her wrist. Daniel sat at his desk with the old ledger open in front of him. His fingers rested on the faint writing of his late mother, and his heart carried both pride and pain. Each name written in the book was a reminder of a promise made, a promise that had never been fully kept. His mother had meant every word, had poured her love and her energy into the Promise Star project, but her early passing had left many threads unfinished. Now those names stared back at him, waiting, silent but alive. He thought about Lila's mother, Adrienne, whose entry read, "Follow-up needed. Mentorship pending." There was no check mark, no signature, nothing to show that someone had come back. The bracelet had survived, but the promise had not. Daniel closed his eyes for a long moment. This was not only about his mother's dream. It was about responsibility. It was about doing right by the people who had trusted in hope. That evening, he called a small meeting with his senior staff. Not the big executives who lived far away, but the managers who walked the halls, who knew the names of cooks and cleaners. They gathered in a quiet conference room, unsure of why the owner had asked for them at such short notice. Daniel stood before them with no slides, no grand charts. He held the old ledger in his hands. "This," he said softly, "was my mother's book. She started a program years ago that promised support to women in need. Some of those promises were never fulfilled. One of those names belonged to the mother of someone who works here among you." The room fell into thoughtful silence. Daniel continued, "I cannot change what was missed then. But I can, and I must make it right now. That is why I am creating the Promise Star Fund. It will provide scholarships, skills training, and real assistance to those families still connected to these names, and also to workers among us who need support. This hotel will not just be a place of work. It will be a place where promises are kept." The managers exchanged glances. Some looked moved, some surprised, but all were attentive. One raised a hand cautiously. "Sir, may I ask, who will guide this? Sometimes funds start with good intentions but get lost in paperwork." Daniel nodded. "You are right. That is why it will not be managed from a distant office. It will be guided by a council made of staff, not just executives. Housekeepers, cooks, receptionists, maintenance workers. People who know the ground. One of them will be Lila." At that moment, Lila was called into the room. She entered shyly, not expecting such attention. Daniel introduced her with respect, not as a maid, but as someone carrying the torch of her mother's hope. "She reminded me of what my mother wanted this program to mean. I have asked her to serve on the council that will shape the fund. She has agreed." Lila looked around the room, a little nervous but steady. "I'm not used to speaking in rooms like this," she admitted, "but I know what it feels like to hold on to hope. If this fund can help even one family keep that hope alive, then it is worth every effort." Her simple words filled the room with quiet strength. Daniel smiled at her, humbled. He knew then that the decision was right. The next weeks were filled with action. Daniel ordered the boxes of records to be catalogued carefully. Volunteers reached out to the names in the ledgers. Some numbers were old, some letters were returned, but a surprising number of people responded. Some remembered the bracelet. Some still had it, tucked away in drawers or worn thin on wrists. Tears flowed in phone calls as voices from the past said, "I thought we were forgotten." At the same time, the Promise Star Fund was officially launched. It was not a showy event with flashing lights. Instead, it was a gathering in the hotel ballroom with staff, their families, and a few community leaders. On a small stage, Daniel spoke briefly, then stepped aside so Lila could speak. She stood at the microphone, her bracelet catching the light. "This is not about gifts or charity," she said, her voice steady. "It is about promises. A promise means someone believes in you, and you must carry it forward. My mother held onto this bracelet as a sign of hope. Now, together, we make sure no promise is left unfinished." Applause rose, not loud and wild, but strong and heartfelt. Staff who usually stayed in the background felt seen that day. The fund began giving out scholarships. A single father who worked as a night janitor received help to send his daughter to nursing school. A cook's wife was supported in starting a tailoring business. Training sessions were arranged for young workers to learn new skills. Every small step was a stone laid on the path of promises kept. Daniel made sure it did not stop with money. He asked that schedules in the hotel be adjusted to allow education leave. Childcare partnerships were formed with nearby centers so parents could balance work and study. The workplace itself began to feel different, lighter, more hopeful. And through it all, Lila kept working. She still cleaned rooms, still checked lists, still smoothed bedspreads with care. But she also attended council meetings, listened to the concerns of her fellow workers, and carried their voices forward. She became a bridge between the quiet halls of the hotel and the quiet dreams of the people who worked there. Daniel often watched from a distance, not to control but to learn. He saw in Lila the same spirit his mother had carried, strength wrapped in gentleness. One evening, as the staff gathering ended and people walked out with smiles, Daniel stood by the wall, his eyes shining. He whispered to himself, "Mother, we are keeping the promise." The journey was not without challenges. Some questioned whether the fund would last. Some asked if it was only for show. But each time doubt rose, a story answered it, a scholarship given, a family lifted, a worker promoted because training gave them new strength. The truth was in the lives touched. One afternoon, Daniel sat again with the ledger. He traced his mother's handwriting with his finger. This time, he did not feel sorrow alone. He felt gratitude. The unfinished pages were now being filled, not with ink, but with action. The bracelet had led him back, like a star guiding a traveler through the night. And now, with Lila and many others beside him, he walked the path his mother had begun. The promise was no longer broken. It was alive again. The months that followed brought quiet but powerful change. The Promise Star Fund was no longer just an idea written in Daniel's notebook or a memory tucked into his mother's old ledgers. It became something real, something that lived in the lives of people touched by it. What began with a bracelet on Lila's wrist had grown into a path for many families, staff, and even strangers who had once believed they were forgotten. The hotel looked the same from the outside: polished glass, shining lights, guests arriving and leaving. But inside, something invisible had shifted. The air carried more warmth, more dignity. Workers felt proud to belong to a place where promises mattered. They worked with the same discipline as before, but now there was also a sense of being part of something greater. Lila continued her daily work. She still pushed her cart down the quiet halls, still smoothed bedspreads with careful hands, still left thank you notes on pillows. Yet now, she also held meetings with the staff council, speaking with cooks about their children's needs, listening to laundry workers about the strain of night shifts, and bringing their voices to the table where decisions were made. People trusted her, not because of her title. She still wore the same uniform, but because of her heart. Her brother, who had once thought his sister's life would remain in quiet struggle, now studied at a community program paid for by the fund. He often told her, "You carried both of us. Now I will carry my part." Those words filled Lila with a new kind of hope. The bracelet still rested on her wrist, but she no longer felt it was only a memory of her mother. It had become a symbol of movement, of promises continued. Daniel visited the hotel often, walking the service corridors, listening, asking, and learning. He no longer came just as an owner checking operations, but as a steward of his mother's legacy. Sometimes he carried the old ledger with him, showing it to staff not as a relic but as proof of where they came from. "These are not just names," he would say. "They are lives. We honor them by continuing." One afternoon, a small ceremony was held in the ballroom. Families who had once been connected to the Promise Star program were invited. Some brought their bracelets, old, worn, but still shining. Others came with stories of how a warm meal, a class, or even just a kind word had given them strength years ago. There were tears, laughter, and long embraces. For many, It felt like closing a circle that had been left open too long. Lila was asked to speak again. She stood at the front, Bracelet catching the soft light, and said, "My mother used to tell me, a promise should never end halfway. Today, I see that promises can be carried forward by many hands. This is not just my story. It belongs to all of us." Her words were simple, but they sank deep into the hearts of everyone in the room. After the gathering, Daniel walked outside into the cool evening air. He stood by the fountain near the hotel entrance, hands in his pockets, eyes lifted to the sky. He felt the same warmth in his chest that had once made him cry in the service hall. But this time, it was not sorrow. It was gratitude. His mother's voice seemed to echo in the breeze, "Hold the ladder steady. Let them climb." The hotel began to earn a new reputation not only for its fine service but also for the way it treated its people. Staff turnover decreased, morale rose, and guests noticed the difference in the way they were welcomed. Review cards often mentioned kindness, warmth, and a sense of care. It was not just good business, it was good humanity. Months later, Lila's dedication was formally recognized. She was promoted to Assistant Operations Manager, not as a favor, but because her leadership was undeniable. She accepted the role with humility and continued to wear her bracelet, saying, "This is not just jewelry. It is my reminder to never forget where I came from." Before the end of the year, a plaque was placed in the staff hallway where everyone could see it daily. It bore the words, "The promise star, a promise kept, and passed on." Beneath the words was a small engraving of a star with faint lines, just like the charm that had once caught Daniel's eye. Staff touched it as they walked by, not as a ritual but as a quiet reminder that they were part of something meaningful. On the day the plaque was unveiled, Lila stood beside it, her bracelet shining softly. Daniel stood a few steps away, watching with tears in his eyes. Not the tears of regret this time, but the tears of a man who knew a promise had been renewed. The billionaire and the maid stood together, no longer as owner and worker, but as two people bound by the same truth: promises, when kept, can change lives. And in that simple hallway, under the glow of ordinary lights, the story of a bracelet, a mother's love, and a son's devotion became a living legacy, one that would continue to guide hearts long after both Daniel and Lila had moved on. The star was no longer just on her wrist. It was shining in the lives of everyone touched by the promise.